New York City was always busy. Cars rushed through streets, people hurried to jobs, and tall buildings touched the sky. In one of the richest neighborhoods stood a mansion, large and cold, made of white stone and shining windows. Inside lived a man named Charles Redford. He was a millionaire, old but strong, and his name was known in business circles for being strict, smart, and heartless. People feared him, respected him, but never liked him. He didn't care. He believed money could buy everything: power, comfort, even respect. For him, poor people were just workers, nothing more. Charles had no family. His wife had died 10 years ago. They had no children. His days were quiet, filled with expensive wine, rare books, and occasional dinner parties. With people just like him, rich and proud, the only sounds in his mansion were from the house staff. He had a butler, a cook, 2 cleaners, and 1 new maid. Her name was Maria Alvarez. Maria was a small woman, no more than 26, with dark hair tied back and warm brown eyes. She had come from Mexico just a year ago and worked hard to support her younger brother and mother back home. She sent money every month, skipping her own needs. She lived in a small rented room, far from the glamour of the city. Her world was simple: work during the day, rest at night, and dream in silence. Maria had joined the cleaning agency a few months back. When she was sent to work at Charles Redford's mansion, she had no idea what kind of man he was. She only knew she had to do her job well, be polite, and stay out of trouble. From the first day, Charles barely noticed her. To him, she was just another maid, one of many. He rarely looked her in the eye. He didn't ask her name. When he passed by, he would nod coldly or say nothing at all. Maria didn't mind. She had faced worse. As long as he didn't yell at her or fire her, she was fine. Her job included dusting the furniture, vacuuming the floors, and cleaning the large living room where a grand piano stood. The piano was beautiful, black and shining, standing tall like a monument in the middle of the room. Maria always cleaned it gently, wiping each key and surface with care. But inside her heart, the piano brought back old memories.
She had once
Played music herself long ago in a small town in Mexico. Her father was a music teacher, kind and patient. He had taught Maria to play the piano from the age of 5. She would sit beside him on an old wooden bench, her small fingers pressing the keys as he smiled and guided her. They didn't have much, but music made their home feel rich. Maria loved it more than anything. She practiced every day, and her father often said she had a gift, but life had changed quickly. When she was 16, her father died in a car accident. Suddenly, her world fell apart. Her mother became sick with grief, and Maria had to stop her music lessons. She worked small jobs to take care of her younger brother. The piano at home was sold to pay for food. Her dreams faded slowly and quietly. She promised herself she would one day return to music, but years passed, and she never touched a piano again. Now, as a maid in a stranger's mansion, she stood in front of another piano, bigger, cleaner, and more expensive than anything she had seen before. Sometimes when no one was watching, she would press one single key. Just a soft note. Just for a second. The sound would fill the empty room, and her heart would ache with both joy and sadness. One afternoon, as she was cleaning, she pressed a key without thinking. A soft sound echoed. She closed her eyes and smiled, remembering a song her father used to play. But at that moment, she didn't realize someone had entered the room. Charles Redford stood near the doorway, watching. He didn't speak right away. When Maria noticed him, she froze. Her hand flew away from the piano, and she stood up straight, frightened, opened her mouth to apologize. But Charles raised one hand and waved it off. "It's fine," he said coldly. "Didn't know you. We're interested in music." Maria didn't answer. She didn't know if it was a trap. She just nodded slightly and began gathering her cleaning things. But Charles watched her closely. He wasn't angry, but he was curious. He had seen something in her eyes when she played that single note. Something real, something he didn't understand. After that day, Charles began noticing her more, not in a kind way, more like someone watching a puzzle. He asked the butler questions about her. Where was she from? How long had she been working there? What was her background? The butler didn't know much, but he said she was quiet, hardworking, and polite. That didn't satisfy Charles. He had a strange feeling. He couldn't explain. It's something about her didn't fit the role of a simple maid. A few days later, during a small dinner party, Charles decided to test her. His wealthy friends had come over, dressed in fine suits and gowns, drinking wine and laughing loudly. They talked about stocks, politics, and art. One of them, a woman named Gloria, asked about the grand piano in the room. "Do you play, Charles?" She asked. "I used to," he replied lazily. "Not anymore." "But the piano looks good, doesn't it?" "Yes," said another guest. "Pity no one plays it." Charles looked at Maria, who stood nearby, holding a tray of drinks. A smirk, he spoke. "Maria," he said loudly. "Come here." She walked over, nervous. Her heart raced. What had she done? "Can you play the piano?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maria looked down, unsure how to answer. She could lie and say no, or tell the truth and risk embarrassment. The guests were already chuckling. "Well," Charles asked again, "don't be shy, just a little tune." For fun, Maria hesitated. The room felt heavy. All eyes were on her. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, but fear held her back. Then something inside her shifted. She looked at Charles, then at the guests, then at the piano. "Okay," she whispered. She walked slowly to the piano, placed the tray on a nearby table, and sat on the bench. Her hands trembled. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she was back in her childhood home. Sitting beside her father, she began to play. At first, it was soft, almost too quiet. Then, slowly, the music grew. A beautiful melody filled the room, gentle, sad, and full of emotion. The guests stopped talking. Some leaned forward. No one expected this. The maid they had mocked was now making music that touched something deep inside them. Even Charles sat still, confused and surprised. Maria played for just 2 minutes. When she finished, the room was silent. No claps, no words, just silence. Then someone whispered, "That was ... beautiful." Maria stood, bowed slightly, and walked away. She picked up her tray and returned to her duties as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. Not just in the room, but in every heart that heard her play, especially in Charles. That night, Charles sat alone in his study. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. The melody played over and over in his mind. He had never felt such emotion from a simple tune. It had come from someone he'd barely noticed before. A maid taught, for the first time in many years. Charles Redford felt something close to shame. He had tried to humiliate Maria, to turn her into a joke. But she had turned the moment into art, into truth, into something he couldn't ignore. He sat quietly, staring at the piano through the open door, wondering who Maria Alvarez really was, and why her music made the walls of his heart begin to crack. After that unforgettable evening, something inside Charles Redford began to shift. He didn't talk about it, didn't tell anyone. But the music Maria had played that night kept repeating in his mind like a ghost that refused to leave. Wasn't just the melody it, was the feeling behind it, the emotion, the honesty. For the first time in years, Charles had felt something real, something beyond money, power, or pride. And the strangest part was that it came from someone he never thought could surprise him, a maid. He spent the next few days watching Maria more closely, not in an obvious way. He didn't want her to know. But he started to notice the little things she did, the way she moved around the house quietly, how she spoke gently to the other staff, how she always seemed calm even when she was tired. She worked harder than anyone else, but never asked for anything. She never complained, never wasted time, and never tried to get attention. One morning, Charles walked past the music room and stopped outside the door. It was slightly open. Inside, Maria was cleaning, dusting the shelves and polishing the piano. She didn't touch the keys, but her eyes lingered on them, as if they were calling to her. Charles noticed her expression, soft, thoughtful, almost sad. He felt something strange in his chest, something he couldn't name. That night, he had another dinner party, smaller than the last one. Just a few close friendsmen who owned companies, lawyers, and investors. They drank expensive wine and talked about markets, property, and politics. The piano stood silently in the corner, like a quiet guest in the room. As the night went on, the conversation turned to music. One of the guests, a bald man with glasses, named Mr. Porter, laughed and said, "Charles, that piano is just a decoration now, isn't it?" Charles raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? You never play it?" "No one does. It's just sitting there like an expensive statue." Another guest joined in, "Unless your maid wants to entertain us again." That was quite a show the other night. Everyone chuckled, thinking it was a joke. But Charles looked toward the door and called, "Maria." She walked in carrying a tray of drinks, unsure of why he called her. Charles took a sip of his wine, then looked at her with a strange smile. "Would you be kind enough to play something for us?" he said. Maria froze. Not again, she thought. Not in front of these people. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She didn't want to be a show. Last time it had come from emotion, from a deep place. This time it felt like a performance, something strange. She hesitated. The guests were already watching her. Some of them had amused looks on their faces as if they expected something funny. Others looked curious. Charles noticed her hesitation. He added softly, "You don't have to if you don't want to." Now, Maria felt trapped. She said no, they would whisper about her. She said yes, they might laugh again. Still, something inside her wanted to prove that her music was not a joke. She nodded and walked toward the piano. This time, she didn't close her eyes. She sat down, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play a classical piece her father had taught her long ago. It was more complex than the first melody, with faster notes and deeper feelings. It spoke of sorrow, love, and strength. The guests went quiet again. Their laughter disappeared. Even Mr. Porter leaned forward, surprised. The music went on for 3 full minutes. When it ended, no one laughed. No one clapped either. They didn't know how to react. Charles nodded slightly and said, "Thank you, Maria." She stood up, bowed, and quietly left the room. The next day, something strange happened.
Oh.
Charles found himself walking into the music room and staring at the piano. He opened the lid, sat down, and tried to play something. His fingers touched the keys, but the sound was dull, lifeless. He had once learned to play when he was young, but now he realized how empty his music felt. There was no feeling in it, no story. He played a few more notes and then gave up. Later that week, he asked his butler to bring a few pieces of sheet music from the library and accidentally left them on top of the piano. When Maria came to clean, she saw them but said nothing. The next day, there were new pieces, different composers, different styles. Charles didn't say anything to her, and she didn't ask any questions. But slowly, one by one, she began to play them after finishing her work. When the house was quiet and no one was around, she never played loudly, just soft melodies, simple tunes. But Charles often listened from upstairs. He would stop reading, close his eyes, and let the music wash over him. Each note felt like a drop of truth. The more he listened, the more he wanted to know about her. Who was she really? Learned to play like that? Why was she working as a maid? He asked the cleaning agency for her file, but it didn't say much. Just her name, age, and country of origin. He thought about asking her directly, but didn't know how. He wasn't used to talking to people like her, especially not in a way that showed interest or respect. One afternoon he finally spoke to her. "You play very well," he said, standing at the doorway of the music room. Maria looked up, surprised. "Thank you, sir. Where did you learn?" She hesitated. No one had asked her that in a long time. She looked down at the piano keys and said softly, "My father taught me. In Mexico, he was a music teacher." Charles nodded. "Do you miss it?" She smiled sadly. "Every day." He didn't say anything more. He just nodded and walked away. Over the next few weeks, he began talking to her more. Just short questions at first. Where she was from, how long she had been in America, what her family was like? Maria answered politely, but kept her walls up. She had learned not to trust the rich to Isley. But Charles was different now. Something in him had changed. He no longer saw her as just a maid. He saw her as a person with a past, with pain, with talent. That confused him. It challenged everything he believed. One evening, after hearing her play a difficult piece, he clapped quietly from the hallway. Maria turned around, shocked. "You should perform," he said. In public, Maria laughed softly, thinking he was joking. "I'm serious," Charles said. "Your music shouldn't be hidden in this house." "I'm not a performer," she replied. "I just play for myself." "Why not?" he asked. "You're better than most I've heard at concerts." Maria shook her head. "Life is not for people like me." Charles didn't understand. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, "I clean houses, send money back home. I can't live a dream that doesn't fit my world." Her words stayed with him all night. The next morning, Charles made a phone call to an old friend, Mr. Elliot Barnes, a retired music agent who once managed some of the best pianists in the country, invited him for dinner, and made sure Maria would be in the house that evening when Mr. Barnes arrived. Charles welcomed him warmly and mentioned Maria's playing. Mr. Barnes raised an eyebrow. "Your maid, you'll see," Charles said. After dinner, Charles casually asked Maria if she would play a small piece. She looked at the two men, unsure, but agreed. She played Chopin, then Mozart, then a melody of her own, simple, sweet, and unforgettable. When she finished, Mr. Barnes was silent. Then he said, "Where did you find her?" Charles smiled. "She found me." Mr. Barnes stood and walked over to Maria. "Would you ever consider performing?" Maria blinked. "No one has ever asked me that. I'm asking you now," he said. "You have something special. I've heard thousands of pianists, but your music feels honest, real." Maria didn't know what to say. Charles watched the scene quietly. For the first time in his life, he felt proud of someone else's success, not because it made him look better, but because he had helped unlock it. That night, Maria sat in her small room, staring at her hands. She remembered her father's words from long ago. "Your music is a gift. Share it. Don't hide it." She closed her eyes and smiled. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to believe in herself again. After that evening, when Mr. Barnes, the retired music agent, had heard Maria play, a new world quietly began to open for her. For many years, Maria's life had been about survival. She cleaned homes, sent money back to her family in Mexico, and kept her dreams tucked away like a secret. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt the stirrings of hope. Maybe her music could be more than just a private memory. Charles Redford, the millionaire who had once tried to humiliate her by forcing her to play the piano in front of his friends, had suddenly become a strange kind of mentor. His cold and harsh manner had softened, replaced by a quiet respect and genuine interest. Charles didn't openly say it, but he was proud of Maria. He had never expected that the woman he saw as a simple maid had such extraordinary talent hidden inside her. Maria wasn't sure what to think. She felt nervous and scared. The idea of performing in public, of stepping outside the safe world of cleaning and cooking, was terrifying. What if people laughed at her? What if she wasn't good enough? But deep down, she also felt excited, like a flower slowly blooming after a long winter. Mr. Barnes was kind and patient. He began working with Maria to help her improve her skills and prepare her for auditions. He talked to her about the music industry, about the hard work and dedication required, and about the chances and challenges she would face. Maria listened, carefully, absorbing every word. Charles arranged for Maria to have a small practice room in the mansion where she could play freely, without fear or interruption. This was a big change from before, when she only had time to play softly when the house was empty. Now she could spend hours practicing difficult pieces and experimenting with her own music. Days turned into weeks, and Maria's confidence grew. She began to feel the joy of music again, not as a burden or a forgotten dream, but as a living part of her life. She remembered her father's face and his gentle smile, his hands guiding hers on the piano keys. His words echoed in her mind. Music is not just notes. It's your heart speaking to the world. At the same time, her relationship with Charles also changed. They spoke more often, sometimes about music, sometimes about life. Charles shared stories of his youth, his business struggles, and his loneliness after losing his wife. Surprised to find that beneath his tough exterior was a man who longed for connection and meaning. One afternoon, Charles surprised Maria by inviting her to join him for tea in his study. She was nervous to be alone with him in such a formal room, but she accepted. As they talked, Charles confessed that he had been wrong to treat her with disdain at first. "I judged you without knowing you," he said quietly. "But your music opened my eyes. You have a rare gift." Maria smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. She wanted to tell him about her family, her struggles, and her hopes, but the words didn't come easily. Instead, she thanked him and promised to work hard. The big moment came when Charles and Mr. Barnes arranged for Maria to audition for a prestigious music school. It was a chance for her to receive formal training and begin a real career as a pianist. Maria practiced day and night, pouring all her emotions into the music. The audition piece was difficult, demanding perfect timing, emotion, and technique. When the day arrived, Maria dressed in her best clothes, simple but clean and neat. She felt nervous but determined. Charles drove her to the school himself, an act that surprised both of them. On the way, he gave her advice, not about business or money, but about believing in herself at the school. Maria waited her turn with other young musicians. Some were confident, others anxious like her. When it was her moment, she stepped onto the stage and sat at the grand piano. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she played. Her fingers moved over the keys with grace and power. Note told a story of pain, hope, loss, and love. The judges listened quietly, their faces unreadable. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then, one of the judges smiled and nodded. Maria left the school feeling a mixture of relief and hope. She didn't know the results yet. She felt proud of herself for taking the step. Back at the mansion, Charles waited anxiously for the phone call from the music school. When it came, the news was good. Maria had been accepted. She would receive a scholarship to study piano professionally. Charles felt a surge of happiness he hadn't experienced in years. He called Maria to share the news, and she cried softly with joy. Her life was changing. The maid who once felt invisible was now a rising star with a future full of possibilities. But not everyone was happy. Some people around Charles whispered that he was wasting time and money on a servant. They said he was foolish to believe in Maria. Charles ignored them. He had seen something real, something valuable. He was determined to support her, no matter what. As Maria started her classes at the music school, she faced new challenges. The work was hard. The other students were talented and often came from wealthy families with years of training. Maria felt out of place sometimes, like she didn't belong. But she worked harder than anyone, fueled by the memories of her father and the chance Charles had given her. Slowly, she began to shine. Her teachers noticed her talent and passion. She made friends who believed in her. She learned not only to play but to understand music deeply. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice that could express everything she felt. Charles continued to visit her, bringing flowers and encouragement. He even arranged a small recital at his mansion where Maria could perform for a select group of friends and music lovers. The night of the recital was magical. Maria played with confidence and emotion. The audience was moved. Some wept. Others clapped loudly. After the recital, Charles stood beside Maria and whispered, "You have changed my life." Maria smiled. "You changed mine too." Their bond grew stronger, built on respect, trust, and shared dreams. Yet life wasn't perfect. Maria struggled with guilt. She worried about leaving her family behind, just home in the simple life she once had. The city was loud and cold compared to the warmth of her village in Mexico. She sometimes wondered if she had made the right choice. Charles understood her feelings. He helped her send more money home and arranged for her family to visit America once. Seeing them together, laughing and talking, made Maria feel whole. Through all this, Maria never forgot where she came from or what she had sacrificed. She carried her past with her like a secret treasure, giving her strength. One evening, as she practiced a new piece, she realized how far she had come. The small girl who had once played on an old, broken piano in a dusty house was now a woman with a future filled with music and hope. Charles watched from the doorway, proud and silent. The man who had once tried to humiliate her was now her biggest supporter. The journey was not over. There would be challenges ahead, but Maria was ready. Music was no longer just a dream, it was her life. 8ings. Maria's life was changing fast, and with every new day came a mix of excitement and challenges. She had gone from being the quiet maid in a wealthy man's mansion to a student at a prestigious music school, living a life she had only dreamed about. But this new path was not easy. It asked more of her than she ever imagined, not just in terms of hard work, but also in facing fears, doubts, and the shadows of her past. At school, Maria felt like she was standing on a huge mountain, looking up at the peak that seemed too far away. She was surrounded by students who had studied music all their lives, many from rich families who had access to the best teachers and instruments. Sometimes she felt out of place, as if she didn't belong in their world. The pressure was strong. Every day she practiced for hours, but sometimes, after long nights of playing, she would sit alone and wonder if she was good enough. Her teachers admired her raw talent, but they also saw that she lacked formal training. Some lessons were difficult because she had to learn new music theory, sight reading, and even how to move her hands in a way that made playing easier and less painful. At times, Maria's fingers would cramp or her back would ache from sitting long hours at the piano, but she never gave up. She remembered her father's words about music being a language of the heart. She was determined to master it. At the mansion, Charles continued to support her. He was no longer just a distant boss. He had become a quiet guardian, always ready with a kind word or an encouraging smile. Charles himself had changed a lot. The cold, proud businessman had softened, learning to appreciate things beyond wealth and power. Watching Maria grow made him reflect on his own life and mistakes. Sometimes, after her practice sessions, they would sit together in the music room, talking about music, life, and dreams. One evening, as Maria was practicing a particularly difficult sonata, Charles quietly came in and sat near the window. He watched her fingers move swiftly across the keys. The music filled the room like a gentle breeze. When she finished, he clapped softly. "You've come a long way," he said. Maria smiled, but looked tired. "It's harder than I thought." Charles nodded. "Great things always are." Despite the support, Maria faced other challenges. Some students whispered about her background, calling her a maid behind her back. She overheard comments like, "How did she get here?" or "She's just lucky." At first, these words hurt deeply. She was proud of her work, proud of who she was, but the insults made her feel small. One day, after a harsh comment from a fellow student, Maria felt tears welling up. She left the practice room quickly and went outside to the school garden. She sat on a bench, trying to catch her breath. At that moment, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Charles. "Remember why you started. You are stronger than you think." Maria read the message again and again. Slowly, a calmness returned to her heart. She wiped her tears and stood up. She decided not to let anyone's words stop her. Her music became her shield and her voice. Whenever she felt weak, she played. The piano spoke for her when she couldn't. Her melodies told stories of pain, hope, courage, and love. And with every note, Maria grew stronger. Meanwhile, Charles was also facing problems. Some of his business partners thought he was losing focus by supporting Maria. They warned him that investing time and money in a servant's music career was risky and foolish. There were rumors that his reputation was being damaged. But Charles didn't care. He believed in Maria's talent and wanted to help her succeed, to show his support. Charles decided to host a bigger recital at his mansion. This time, it would not be just friends or a few music lovers. He invited important people from the music world: producers, critics, concert organizers. He wanted Maria's talent to be seen and appreciated. Maria was nervous. This recital could change her life, but the fear of failure was overwhelming. Charles helped her prepare, hiring a vocal coach and arranging special lessons. He encouraged her every step of the way. The night of the recital arrived. The mansion was beautifully decorated, filled with guests in elegant clothes and sparkling jewelry. Maria wore a simple, elegant dress. Her heart raced as she took the stage, sat at the grand piano, and looked at the audience. She closed her eyes and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers like a river, soft at times, powerful. At others, every note was filled with emotion. The audience was silent, completely absorbed. Maria played with all her heart, telling a story of struggle and triumph through her melodies. When the last note faded, the room exploded in applause. People stood up, cheering and clapping. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Critics whispered to each other, clearly impressed. Maria felt a wave of relief and happiness. Charles came on stage and hugged her tightly. "You did it," he said proudly. Maria smiled through tears. She had proven to herself and the world that she belonged. After the recital, many people approached Maria with offers, invitations to perform at concerts, to record music, and to travel. It was a dream come true, but Maria remained humble. She remembered where she came from and the sacrifices she had made. She wanted to use her success not just for herself, but to help others like her, those who had dreams but lacked opportunities. As her career grew, Maria began to speak publicly about her journey from a maid to a musician. She inspired many young people, especially girls from poor families, to believe in themselves and never give up. Charles watched her rise with pride. The millionaire who had once tried to humiliate her had become her biggest supporter and friend. Their lives were forever changed by a simple moment. A melody played on a piano that left a man silent and opened a door to a new world. Maria's music was no longer just a secret gift. It was a powerful voice that touched hearts and changed lives. And through it all, she never forgot the piano and the quiet mansion where her dreams began. Maria's journey from a humble maid to a celebrated pianist had reached a turning point. The path had not been easy, but now the world was beginning to notice her talent and the story behind it. This last part of her journey was about transformation, not just of her career, but of her spirit, her relationships, and the legacy she would leave. The success of her big recital at Charles's mansion had opened many doors. Invitations poured in from concert halls, music festivals, and recording studios. People wanted to hear her play, to meet the woman whose music was so full of passion and honesty. Maria, who had once feared even playing a few notes in front of strangers, was now becoming a star. But with this success came new challenges. The pressure to perform well, to meet the expectations of her new audience, was intense. Maria struggled to balance her public life with her private one. She missed the quiet moments when she could simply sit and play for herself, without an audience or critics watching. She sometimes felt lonely amidst the applause and bright lights. Still, she knew her music was a gift, something meant to be shared. She continued to practice daily, pushing herself to improve and to find new depths in her art. Every concert, every recording was a new story she told through her fingers. Charles remained a steady presence in her life. Over time, their relationship grew deeper, no longer just the connection of employer and employee, but something closer to family. Charles had seen the best and worst of Maria, and he loved her not for her past, but for the person she had become. Maria, in turn, saw Charles as a protector and a friend, someone who had believed in her when no one else did. Their bond was not without its challenges. The differences in their worlds, his wealth, and her humble beginnings, sometimes made things complicated. Gossip and whispers surrounded them, but they ignored it. What mattered was the trust and respect between them. One day, Maria received news that her family back in Mexico was struggling. Her mother was sick, and the financial burden was heavy. Though Maria had sent money regularly, the distance made it hard to truly help. She felt torn between her new life and the family she loved. Charles offered his support without hesitation. He arranged for Maria's family to come to the United States for a visit, and he helped with medical care. For the first time in years, Maria's family saw her perform live. They were overwhelmed with pride and tears. Maria felt whole again. This reunion inspired Maria even more. She wanted to use her music to give back, to help others who, like her, had faced hardships. She began organizing charity concerts, raising funds for education and health care in poor communities. Her music became a beacon of hope, not just a personal achievement. In the midst of her busy career, Maria also found time to teach. She started giving piano lessons to children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Seeing their eyes light up when they learned new songs reminded her of her own journey. She wanted to pass on not only musical skills, but also courage and belief. Her story was featured in newspapers and magazines. Journalists called her the maid who became a millionaire's muse, or the pianist who played her way out of poverty. Maria didn't mind the attention but always remained humble. She emphasized the hard work and support she had received. Along the way, despite all the success, Maria never forgot the day Charles first forced her to play the piano, hoping to humiliate her. Instead of breaking her spirit, that moment had sparked a transformation. It had shown her own strength and talent. One evening, years after her first recital, Maria sat alone at the piano in Charles's mansion. The house was quiet, filled with memories. She played a soft melody, one that her father had taught her when she was a child. The notes floated in the air, carrying stories of hope, struggle, and triumph. Charles entered the room quietly and stood behind her. "You've come so far," he said softly. Maria smiled without turning. "It's because someone believed in me." Charles nodded. "And because you never gave up." They sat together in silence, the music binding them. Maria's life was a powerful reminder that talent and courage could overcome even the greatest obstacles. From cleaning floors to filling concert halls, her journey was a testament to the human spirit. Her music touched hearts worldwide, inspiring people to chase their dreams no matter their circumstances. As her career continued to grow, Maria planned to write a book about her life. She wanted to tell her story in her own words, to reach those who felt trapped by their situations. She hoped to show that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. The millionaire who once tried to humiliate her had instead helped unlock a hidden treasure, young woman's extraordinary talent and resilience. Maria's story was proof that true greatness could come from kindness, belief, and the courage to play your own song, no matter who's listening. And so, with every note she played, Maria wrote the final chapter of her transformation, life changed by music, love, and the strength to rise above.